What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. My channel name is College Football Frenzy, back with another video, and today I'm going to be breaking down the top 10 matchups of Week 5 for the 2020 college football season. Now, as this coronavirus keeps going on, it looks like there probably will be a shortened season, or maybe the season might not start on time, or at least certain schools might not be competing in college football. It looks like certain matchups that we are all looking forward to might not happen. That being said, I'm still going to break down the top 10 matchups of Week 5, acting like it's not the coronavirus won't affect it, but some of these matchups could not happen. Now, as for the games in Week 5 that are scheduled, I think there's some pretty good matchups overall. It's a pretty balanced week of matchups. A lot of schools now at this point are getting into in-conference play, and there's a ton of good in-conference matchups, as well as a few decent out-of-conference matchups. So I'm very excited for Week 5 of the college football season. It's got a ton of big matchups, and without further ado, let's get right into it, starting out right away. Number 10, we have Michigan State versus Iowa. This is a pretty big game in my opinion. Now, this would be even a bigger game 4 or 5, maybe 2 years ago, when both these schools at times were ranked in the top 25 or the top 10. Iowa last year had a great season, finishing the season 10-3. Michigan State, big disappointment, finished only 7-6. Now, the reason why I think this is a good game is because overall, both teams are going to be fighting for bowl eligibility, in my opinion. It's going to be a competitive game. This is a game in which both schools really need to win in order to get some momentum for the season, because their schedules, I think both teams' schedules have a ton of ranked opponents on it and are very tough, and they're both losing a lot. Michigan State, obviously, losing Mark D'Antonio, new head coach, and Iowa, they're losing some of their best players like Tristan Wirfs, AJ Espinosa. So this is a big game for these two teams. They might not be as good as they were the last couple of years, but this is just an important game for these two schools to start off the season in a right way. You know, I guess kind of it's towards the middle of the season, but they have a lot of tough games to go after this, so getting a win here would be a big momentum booster. But right now I have this at 10. At this point, I think Iowa could have a loss or maybe two, so they might not even be ranked. And Michigan State, they might have a loss or two, so they're probably not going to be ranked. But you know, I still think it's going to be a competitive matchup. Memphis versus SMU. This was probably the greatest group of 5 matchup we had last year at Memphis. SMU came into the game undefeated. Memphis with, I believe, only 1 loss. It was the biggest game in the American Athletic that year. It was just a great high-scoring offensive matchup. Memphis was clearly ahead pretty much the whole time, but SMU had a few surges, especially late in the game. Memphis ended up pulling off the victory, and they later went to a New Year's Six Bowl. For this upcoming season, it's going to be interesting to see how SMU does, considering last year they kind of ended with a tough stretch of games and lost a few games, including getting destroyed by FAU in their bowl game. So it'll be interesting to see how SMU does this time around this season. They're going to be at home, hosting Memphis, who just lost Mike Norvell and a few other weapons. It should be interesting, in my opinion, to see how this Memphis and SMU teams, to see how they adjust, and to see if they can continue the success that they had at certain points in last season, or if they're going to have a drop-off. But overall, it should be a good game, hopefully a lot of points like it was last year. So I have this at 9 right now, and again, both these teams, despite losing some talent, they definitely could be ranked. 8, Navy versus Air Force. Big matchup here. I think the winner of this game will win the Commander's Cup. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the trophy that Army, Navy, and Air Force compete for every year. They all play each other once a year, and the team with the best record against the other two schools ends up taking the Commander's Cup. There's some tiebreakers in there and stuff like that. For this upcoming season, I think this Air Force versus Navy game is going to be very good. It should be an entertaining one. Air Force is at home. They have terrible returning production and a not great recruiting class, but playing at home, it's going to be a very good atmosphere. I think it should be exciting. You know, Army had a big drop-off last year. I expect for them to be a pretty average team for this upcoming season. I don't think they're going to get the job done against Air Force and Navy, so I think this game might be the decider on who wins the Commander's Cup. So overall, this is really, in my opinion, a huge game, so I have it at 8. 7, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. Mississippi State, I think the coronavirus is definitely going to hurt them because they have a new head coach with Mike Leach. But Mississippi State overall, you know, pretty good recruiting class. Mike Leach is still a pretty good coach, and it should be an interesting matchup to see at home in Starkville playing against Texas A&M, who's definitely one of the better SEC teams. But we saw last year a few decent SEC teams were able to give them trouble, so this definitely isn't a guaranteed win for Texas A&M, especially considering they're playing on the road. Kellen Mond's definitely going to improve, and Jimbo Fisher's a decent head coach, but I definitely expect Mississippi State to give Texas A&M a pretty big challenge. So this is probably one of the best SEC matchups that week. I think it should be really entertaining overall. Mississippi State is a pretty good quarterback with KJ Costello. We'll see how he does against that Texas A&M defense. So this is a game I really am excited to see in the SEC. So currently I have this as the number 7 game. All right, number 6, we have a rematch of the Big 12 championship last year, Baylor versus Oklahoma. Now, this game isn't higher on the list because overall, I feel like both teams are losing talent, especially Baylor. They're losing a lot on the defense, and they're losing head coach Matt Rule, whereas Oklahoma is still probably going to be a top 10 team next year, if not at least top 15. So this wasn't high. This wasn't as high as some people probably expected it to be. I just feel like Oklahoma at home and Norman's going to probably get the job done. But overall, it's a rematch of the Big 12 championship. There's going to be a high tension between these two teams. And David Aranda, coming from LSU, he was the defensive coordinator, so he's probably going to be a good fit considering Baylor has been more of a defensive school lately. They had a great defense last year, the best in the Big 12. Again, losing a lot of talent on the defense. But we'll see how he works with the team. Again, it should be an intriguing matchup nonetheless, despite Baylor losing a lot of talent. So I have this at 6 right now. 5, Kentucky versus Auburn. I think Auburn, with the talent they have returning, and they're not losing that much besides Derek Brown, I think Auburn's going to be a very good football team next year. A lot of returning production, great recruiting class. So I think they're very talented at home. Jordan Hare is not an easy place to play. That being said, Kentucky is still a pretty good football team overall that I expect to have a bounce back year, play at least a little better overall next year. I mean, they're losing Lynn Bowden, but Joey Gatewood, who transferred from Auburn to Kentucky, he's a pretty good quarterback, and I expect him to make a difference at the Kentucky program. So I'm definitely interested to see how this matchup goes. It should be a fun one. I'm excited to see Joey Gatewood's return to Jordan Hare. I definitely favor the Tigers, but it should be a good game in my opinion. All right, rivalry matchup here, Oregon versus Washington. No matter really how good one team is, it's usually close, I feel like. Last year, Oregon was clearly the better team than Washington. They went into Washington, and Washington nearly won that game. They very well could have. It was a great fight Washington put up. For this upcoming season, Oregon's clearly more talented. Washington just lost Jacob Eason, their quarterback, and of course, they lost legendary head coach Chris Peterson. So Washington's definitely losing a lot, and Oregon is not losing much besides Justin Herbert, and they've got a great defense. But at the end of the day, it's a rivalry game. It's a good Pac-12 matchup. And, I think Washington, despite losing talent, I think they can still put up a competitive fight against Oregon just because of the sake of the rivalry. So I have this as a pretty good matchup right now. 4, you have USC versus Utah. So Utah's a team that does not have great returning production. They're losing a lot on the defense. On the offense, they're probably losing their 2 best players, Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss. But they are at home. And to be honest, Utah's still going to be competitive nonetheless, despite losing that talent. They're a good football team. They have a great head coach, one of the best head coaches, if not the best head coach in the Pac-12, Kyle Whittingham. So despite Utah losing that talent at home, I expect them to give USC a big challenge. USC clearly going to be very talented next year. Great returning production, best quarterback in the Pac-12, Kenan Slovis. So USC is definitely the more talented team, but at Utah, I expect a big competitive fight. The game last year was pretty good overall. USC handed Utah their only regular season loss. So I expect it to be a pretty good matchup. I'm excited to see how this one goes. I'll probably favor USC, but it's going to be a good game, and it has big Pac-12 South implications. Despite Utah losing all that talent, I would not be shocked if they were to win the division again. And, USC, they're going to be fighting to win the division, and Arizona State's going to be in the mix too. So a very big game for Pac-12 South division implications. Number 2, we have Penn State versus Michigan. big Big Ten matchup. This is probably the only week you're going to see Ohio State rooting for Michigan. Why? Because Ohio State definitely feels less confident about going into Happy Valley than they do about beating Michigan at home. So I think Ohio State might be rooting for Michigan here. But when you get to the actual matchup, it's a pretty good matchup. Last year, Michigan gave a great fight to Penn State. I think they played some of their best football of the year against Penn State in that second half. Penn State came out swinging early on. Michigan tried to come back. They lost in the end because their receiver, I think it was Ronnie Bell. I'm not too sure, but I believe it was Ronnie Bell. He dropped a pass in the end zone on like fourth down. So Penn State barely won, but this was a very good football game overall in the whiteout. It's getting competitive. I feel like, every year these two teams are going to give each other a good fight. Michigan won the last time this game was played in the Big House. Both these teams, top 15 recruiting classes, decent returning talent. I would argue Penn State is the better returning talent, but in the Big House, it's going to be a great atmosphere and a great game. I'm very excited to see how this one goes overall. There's going to be a lot of great talent playing on this field. So I have this at 2, and Michigan plays Wisconsin the week before that, so they have a tough schedule to start out the season, but it's going to be an exciting game nonetheless. Number 1, Wisconsin versus Notre Dame. This is a great matchup in my opinion. I would be pretty disappointed if game day didn't go here. It's in Green Bay, a neutral site. It's going to be a fun atmosphere at the Packer Stadium. It's a great stadium to play at. It's going to be a great atmosphere in early October. Notre Dame, they've got some returning talent. They're losing Cole Kmet, and I think they are losing Chase Claypool, but Ian Book's returning. That's definitely big. They're going to be a possible top 10 team next year, maybe even a playoff contender if they can beat Clemson. So this is a big game for Notre Dame if they're going to be good next year. And Wisconsin, they definitely will probably have the home crowd advantage. And, I think overall talent-wise, they have a much better defense than Notre Dame does. I think it's a top 5 defense. The offense is the one concern. There's not really anybody on offense who screams to me that they're really good. I think losing Jonathan Taylor is going to hurt a lot. And the pass attack, I think it's less than average. I don't really like Jack Cohen. But overall, the defense for Wisconsin is very good. So it's going to be fun to see Ian Book going up against the Wisconsin defense. And just in that atmosphere in Green Bay, it's going to be fun to see. It's going to be a great game. I really hope Saturday Night Football goes here because this would be such a fun matchup. So this rounds out my top 10. I think this is a great game overall. But anyway, guys, that's it for now. Thanks for joining in. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Check out all my other videos. Recommend this content to your friends. And that's it. Thanks for joining in.